YLC conference, please help us welcome United States Senator and presidential candidate, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Good morning. Well, let me thank you for inviting me to say a few words. I'm going to get you really nervous. You all ready to get nervous? The future of our country, and given the crisis of climate change, the future of the world rests upon your generation. Are you ready to accept that challenge? If your generation would do nothing more than vote at the same level as the older generation, we can transform this country into a nation of economic, social, racial, and environmental justice. Justice. You know better than I that maybe the most important language in the Bible is to do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. To treat other people with the dignity and respect and justice that you would like to be treated with. And that is what our campaign is about. It's a justice campaign, and we'd love to have you on board that justice train. And what does justice mean in real, cold, concrete terms? What it means is that we will end racism in every form in our society. In the economy, in education, and in healthcare. In a criminal justice system, which is rampantly racist. It means that we will create an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. What does that mean? It means that we will raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour, which disproportionately impacts people of color. It means that we will make health care a human right, not a privilege. Justice does not exist when 30,000 people this year will die because they don't have access to the health care that they need. When 500,000 people go bankrupt because they cannot afford the high cost of health care. Justice means that all of our people, regardless of income, have the right to all of the education that they need. And I am proud to have helped lead the effort to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, and to expand Pell Grant funding so that no working-class young person leaves school in debt. And furthermore, we are leading the effort to cancel all student debt in this country. And we are doing that because in the richest country in the history of the world, your generation should not have a lower standard of living than your parents. And when we talk about justice, maybe the most profound issue we talk about is the need to make sure that your children and your grandchildren will live in a planet that is healthy and is habitable. Because we are going to stand up to the fossil fuel industry and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, we got a president, and it gives me no joy to tell you this. We have a president who is a racist, he is a sexist, he is a homophobe, he is a xenophobe, he is a religious bigot, and he happens to be a pathological liar. And what he is trying to do, and what we will not allow him to do, is to divide us up by the color of our skin or our religion or where we were born. We're going to come together. And when we come together and when we treat all people with respect and dignity, we are going to create a nation and a government not based on greed, not based on discrimination, not based on picking on people who are poor and oppressing those, not based on a nation in which 3 people have more wealth than the bottom half of America. We are going, with your help, to create a government and an economy that works for all of us. So that is the justice campaign that we are waging. But we cannot succeed unless millions of people get involved in this campaign, unless we stand up to those governors who are trying to suppress the vote here in Georgia and all over this country, who are making it harder for people to vote because they're poor or they're people of color. We are going to make it easier for people to vote, not harder for people to vote. So we are in an unprecedented moment in American history. And the Bible, if it is about anything, is about justice. It is about reaching out to people in need. It is about standing up to the wealthy and the powerful. That's what this campaign is about. And what we are about is not just defeating the most dangerous president in modern American history. We are about transforming this nation to make it work for all of us. Thank you all very much.
Come on, one more time, everybody. Let's appreciate those opening remarks by Senator Bernie Sanders. So, Senator Sanders, as we have been asking all of the candidates as they come, you are at the Black Church Presidential Candidate Conversation Series, the oldest, most revered institution in our community is indeed the Black Church. During the history of our existence, we have indeed seen the war to end slavery, some argue, the war to end poverty, the war on drugs, and now with the rise of white nationalism, many of us are asking, when will we have a war to end white supremacy and racism in this country? What would you do as president that would validate and make us comfortable to give you our vote to be the leader to end that war on white supremacy, or to begin that war on white supremacy?
That's right. You know, if you would ask me, I would tell you that never in my lifetime would I have believed it possible that we have a president who, when seeing neo-Nazis and white nationalists out on the streets in Charlottesville, would tell us that, you know, some of them are pretty fine people. They are not fine people. And let me just tell you on a personal note, I'm Jewish. My family came from Poland. My father's whole family was wiped out by Hitler and his white nationalism. So what we have got to do, for a start, is use the bully pulpit to bring us together, not to divide us. And we have got to use all of the legislative capabilities that we have. when somebody hurts somebody else because of the color of their skin, and when somebody kills somebody because of the color of their skin, this is not just a hate crime, which it is. We're talking about domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism. So we can have attacks in this country against other people, and we're going to throw the full force of the law against those people. Second thing that we do is we do it by action and not just words. We have a government, we have an administration, we have a cabinet that looks like America, that looks like all of us, the reflection of America. And when we combat white nationalism and when we combat racism, we are going to use all of the laws at our power, including executive orders in every area, to make certain that we end the discrimination which now exists in healthcare, where black women are dying 3 times the rate of white women when they give birth. We will end the redlining that exists in housing discrimination. We will end the absurdity of black kids leaving school much more deeply in debt than do white kids. So our job is to fight racism at every level, to make it clear that too many people have fought over the years, too many people have died against racism to allow it to resurface and flourish in America. We will go to war against white nationalism and racism in every aspect of our lives.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, much of the conversation that we are now having about health care is as a result of your leadership, particularly around Medicare for All. So can you talk to us about the importance of your health care positions and what it means for black people?
I'm delighted to do that.
Quickly.
How many people here believe that health care is a human right? Believe you have a right to go to any doctor you want when you're ill? Have a right to go to the hospital when you're sick and not come out with a huge medical bill? What we are talking about is significant for every American. It is especially significant, disproportionately, to the African American community, because African Americans are less likely to have insurance than white Americans, more likely to leave a hospital with a bill they cannot afford to pay. What Medicare for All means is you go to the doctor when you need to, no out-of-pocket expense, no deductibles, no co-payments, no premiums. It means you leave the hospital without a bill. It means, and you want to hear something directly applicable to the African American community, which sadly has a higher rate of diabetes than the white community. I was in Canada a couple of weeks ago. The cost of insulin in Canada, which diabetics need, is 1/10 the price that it is in the United States. 1/10 the price. We are going to take on the pharmaceutical industry and substantially lower the cost of insulin and other medications that people need. And here is the issue that we all have to tackle. What is the function of a rational, humane healthcare system? Last year, the healthcare industry made $100 billion in profit. 30,000 people died, 87 million are uninsured and underinsured, 500,000 people went bankrupt. We have got to create a healthcare system that is based on human needs, not on huge profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. And that's what my Medicare for All bill does. And let me just conclude. You're going to see a lot of advertising on television attacking me and attacking Medicare for All. And understand who is paying for it. People who are paying for those ads make tens of billions of dollars a year. Our job now is to stand up to them and tell them whether they like it or not, This country is going to do what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to all as a human right.
Yes. We have a few more minutes, and we wanted to try to touch on voter suppression and also gun violence. So if you could try to be as brief as you can, that would be great.
It's not a hint that I've been going on too long.
No, it's not a hint. Listen, you're in a black church, and we are known to be intoxicated with the exuberance of our own verbosity. Somebody say amen, right? But let us just turn to gun violence for one quick moment. We know that gun violence disproportionately impacts black and brown communities, particularly when it comes to homicide. We know that suicides disproportionately impact many white men. We know that intimate partner violence disproportionately impacts black women. We know that mass shootings are impacting all of us. Often in the gun violence conversation, we rarely hear about the community-based solutions that are led by people of color all across this country to address issues of violence in our neighborhoods. What will you do in your campaign going forward, and if you become the president, to make sure that issues of urban gun violence become just as prominent in the gun violence conversation as issues of mass shootings? So talking about gun violence in urban communities, adding that into the conversation, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, all right. Let me just talk in two levels. The broader level, before I get to your question, is we have almost 400 million guns in this country. We have some 10 million assault weapons. That's the bad news. The good news is the American people are now prepared to stand up to the NRA, an NRA that has dominated gun legislation in Washington. So we have got to come together, and I think we all know what we have to do. We have to end the gun show loophole. We need to expand background checks. We need to end the ability of people to buy guns legally and then sell them to criminal elements. And in my strong view, and I've held this view for 30 years, we need to end the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. They are designed to kill people. Now, your question is, how do we get to the root of violence and guns? Well, by having expanded background checks, that will help. But ultimately, we are going to have to get into the communities and make sure that we are investing in distressed communities that give young people the opportunity to look out into the future of their lives with hope and optimism. And that means pouring significant amounts of money into rebuilding our communities, giving kids the jobs and the education that they need. And we have education legislation that will, among other things, triple funding for Title I schools, making sure that kids have the mentors that they need so they don't fall through the cracks and get into trouble. To build the housing that we need and oppose the gentrification, which is throwing working class people out of the homes that they are living in. So to answer your question, if people are looking to their future, whether they're black or white or whoever, with hope and optimism, if they have education, they have decent jobs, they're not going to turn to drugs. They're going to turn to a better way of life, and that is the root cause of addressing the violence and guns that we see in the country.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Brothers and sisters, let's give Senator Sanders a warm YLC. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Senator Bernie Sanders, everybody, come on. Give him a Young Leaders Conference welcome. And thanks for being here. All right. We are excited. We are down to our last candidate. So glad to have her here. Again, go to blackchurchpoll.com and make sure your voice is indeed heard. Let's prepare to receive our next candidate.
Joining us from the great state of New Hampshire, YLC Conference, please help us welcome United States Senator and presidential candidate, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
right, hello everyone. Where two or more are gathered in his name. The Lord is with us, let us rejoice. I know I get teased a lot about being the woman with a lot of plans, but I think if you want to get something done, you ought to have a plan. So I thought what I'd do this morning is, I know I'm going to get a lot of good questions. I just tell you first, though, a little bit about who I am and try to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. My name is Elizabeth Warren. I was born and raised in Oklahoma. Have I got any Okies? Few. Okay, we'll take it. There aren't that many of us. Born and raised in Oklahoma. I was born and raised in the Methodist Church. McFarland Methodist Church in Norman, and then May Avenue Methodist Church in Oklahoma City. From the time I was 2 years old, rather in second grade, I have known exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear it for America's public school teachers? Yes. Now, my family didn't have much. We had a lot of bumps along the way. My daddy ended up as a janitor. My mom worked a minimum wage job at Sears. And by the time I graduated from high school, there was no money to send me to college. I had a lot of twists and turns along the way. I got married early. I dropped out of school. Finally, I found a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. I hung on for dear life. I finished my degree, and I became a special needs teacher. So I've lived my dream job. I probably would still be doing that work today, but by the end of the first year in teaching, I was expecting a baby, and the principal did what principals did in those days, wished me luck, and hired someone else for the job. I ended up going to law school. I had another baby. I practiced law for 45 minutes, and then went back to my first love, which is teaching. I've taught law students, I've taught little folks, and I've taught fifth grade Sunday school, which maybe was the biggest challenge of all. For me, my life has been anchored around my faith, and in particular, the guiding principle for me has been Matthew 25. And I know I come into a room like this, I don't have to tell the story, that you all know about the separation when the shepherd has to decide how to separate the goats from the sheep. And I think of the passage after they're separated and the sheep say, "Why us, Lord? What did we do?" And when the Lord says, "For I was hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me." Right? I was in prison. There we go. And you visited me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. And when the sheep say, "But we don't remember seeing you, Lord," that the Lord says, "Inasmuch as ye hath done it unto one of these, the least of my brethren, ye have done it unto me." And for me, what that's about is two things. The first is there's God in every single one of us. Every single one of us has the Lord within us. And that's what that passage means. And secondly, that the Lord does not call on us to sit back. The Lord does not call on us just to have a good heart. The Lord calls us to act. To feed the hungry, to give water to the thirsty, to visit those in prison. That this is what the Lord requires of us. And my life has been about those twin parts. First is the worth of every single human being. And second is the obligation to act. I know that sometimes right now in this country, it's a hard fight, and it feels that we fight in vain, but we do not. This is a righteous fight. This is a righteous fight. This is a righteous fight. We fight it for the right reasons, and we will do what is right for the people who are counting on us. Thank you all for having me here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Mark. Is this one for me? Okay, I got it.
That's for you. So, Senator, thank you for coming.
I'm glad to be here.
And you're here with black church folks,
Yep.
young black church folks.
Yes.
And we, as you know, are people of values, and our faith grounds us and informs our actions, including the decisions we make at the ballot box. So I'd like you to share with us, why should black church folks trust you with their vote?
So, I put out a lot of plans.
I heard.
And you've heard. But the reason for doing that is partly to say, this is where I'll go. Those plans show my values. But it's also partly to say, and you can hold me accountable. In a democracy, I think that's how it should work, and we've had way too little of that. Yeah, there's a lot of, general, highfalutin language around it, but the real point is to say, this is what I will fight for. And by seeing that, you can see the value in every person. Why it is that I say a 2-cent wealth tax on the bazillionaires who can afford this, so we can make an investment in every single one of our babies. Universal child care for all of them. And that we leave no one behind, that it's about raising the wages for every child care worker and every preschool teacher in America. To put it out there with specificity, to put it out there in particular, so you can see the values, so you can be part of the fight, so you can help make that change, and so you can hold me accountable for every word I've uttered.
Yes, accountability. Thank you. Can you spend a few moments talking to us about what you will do to counteract voter suppression and all of the efforts that are, in many respects, targeted at many of us in this room, trying to keep us and our family members from being able to get to the ballot box and even vote?
That's right. So I've put out a plan on voting.
They say you have a plan for everything.
I have a plan for that. That's exactly right. And it's basically to roll back every one of these racist voter suppression laws that's been passed. We could do that at the federal level, and we should do it at the federal level. We need to call it out, and we need to call it out for the ugly intentions that underlie it. We also need to think about the multiple ways that voter suppression occurs. On Native American tribes, on tribal lands, for example, saying that people have to have street addresses in an area where many people don't have street addresses. Purging the voter rolls, keeping people who have any kind of felony convictions from being able to vote. Many, many ways to do this, but there's one more, and that is to tell people their vote doesn't matter. To tell them it just doesn't count. Don't worry, politicians are all the same. There's not any difference between them. None of them are going to be there to help you, because that keeps people from having hope. And if you don't have hope, then you don't go to the polls and vote. So I see this as, this is another reason. We talk not just about the guy in the White House, we talk about our vision for how we build a future. A vision that encompasses hope, not just for those born at the top, not just for those born into privilege, but real hope for every one of our children, that when we make that commitment, that's the best way to get people to the polls and to be able to make this democracy work, not just for the other guys, make it work for us.
Is the issue of educational debt. I referenced yesterday that my brother and his wife are sitting on 6 figures of debt, close to $200,000. For the folks in the audience who are carrying debt, educational debt, just for getting an education, it hampers and inhibits your ability to build your business, to buy a home, to really engage in your piece of the American dream. Can you tell us what your plan is around educational debt?
I sure can. And here's where I actually want to start this, because I think it's important. I'm not just making an abstract promise here. I start with a wealth tax. It's time to have a wealth tax in America. And here's how my wealth tax would work. It's a tax, your first $50 million is free and clear. I hope some people relaxed over that. But when you hit your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. And 2 cents for every dollar after that. Anybody in here own a home, grow up in a family that owned a home? You've been paying a wealth tax for a long time. It's just called a property tax. And what I'm saying that's different is for the truly rich, more than $50 million in assets, it's more than your real estate. It's your stock portfolio, the diamonds, the Rembrandt, and the yacht. I just want them all included in how we think about wealth. And I say to those folks, good for you, you made it big, but I guarantee you didn't build a fortune in America without using workers that all of us help pay to educate. You built a fortune in America getting your goods to market on roads and bridges all of us help pay to build. You were protected by police and firefighters, all of us paid their salaries. And we're glad for anybody to make it big. We want to make those investments as a country. But when you make it big, I mean really big, I mean the top 1/10 of 1%, pitch in 2 cents so everybody else in this country gets a chance to make it. And when we do that, we can invest across this country. So here's how it works. Universal child care for every baby in this country age 0 to 5. Pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in this country. Raising the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in this country. Technical school, community college, 4-year college, tuition free for every kid in this country. Increasing the Pell Grants so there's real access for kids who don't come from families with money. $50 billion into our historically black colleges and universities. All of that to help level the playing field, and one more, and that is cancel student loan debt for 95% of the folks who've got it. This is about our values. You know, look, every time you look at a budget, a lot of people think it's just numbers. For me, it's about our values. We could leave that 2 cents with the bazillionaires, and they'll keep growing their fortunes. Or we can pitch that 2 cents in and create opportunity across this country. Create opportunity, not just for those who were born into it, but create opportunity for everyone, and canceling student loan debt is a big part of that.
We'd love to hear your thoughts about the intersection of gun violence, incarceration, and police violence. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of your plans that you have that will address the lack of safety many black Americans in this country feel, particularly in this moment when the rise of white the rise of white nationalism is a reality among all of us as well.
Actually, since you ended this with white nationalism, can I just say, we need to treat white nationalism like the terrorist threat that it is. We need to take it seriously, and we need a Department of Justice that takes it seriously and goes after it. On the question of gun violence, I know that there have been mass shootings again. This catches the headlines, and it's important. But that gun violence is occurring every day on our sidewalks, in parks, in streets, and particularly in communities of color. And it doesn't get a headline, but it matters. And it should matter to every one of us. When I first ran for the Senate, I met with mothers who had lost children to gun violence, mothers in the Boston area principally. And when I was elected to the Senate, my very first State of the Union was just a few weeks after I was elected. And Kim Odom, who's a pastor in Boston, who has devoted her life to changing our gun laws in honor of her son, who was shot coming home from basketball practice, right out on the sidewalk near their home. We need to reduce gun violence in this country. And it's not enough to say, here's one idea, or here are two statutes that we're going to change. I'm all for that. I believe in we need to have better background checks. We need to take assault weapons off the streets. But we really need to think of this as we're going to reduce violence. And we've got to end violence in our communities. We've got to protect our children. I think of it this way. Back in 1965, there were 5 deaths for every 1,000,000 miles that were traveled on our highways. And the press was talking about carnage. They're talking about way too many deaths, that people were dying and what the projections would mean for people dying. And as a country, we said, you know, we got to change that. It's going to be hard, but we've got to change it. Some of the changes were obvious: seat belts, safety glass. Some weren't even invented yet, like airbags and automatic braking systems. But we said, the deaths are a cost to all of us, and we're going to find a way to keep pushing down on those numbers. We're going to fund the research. We're going to make this happen. I want to do the same thing with gun violence. I want to commit that while I am president, we reduce gun violence by 80% across this country. Violence in all of our neighborhoods. Violence by suicide. Violence that costs us 40,000 of our beloved brothers and sisters a year. We need to commit to do this, to treat it like the public health crisis it is, to treat it like the policing crisis it is, to treat it like a crisis in each and every one of our families. I'm all in on this one.
So we got a lot of sisters in the room, and we touched on this earlier. African American maternal mortality rates are 3 times those of white people, white women. How can we address this issue of the disparity between the health rates?
So, can I sound just a little bit impatient here? I want you all to think about this. It's exactly as the Reverend Daughtry said. It's African American women die at about 3 times the rate of white women, and that's true when you adjust for everything, for education, for income, for neighborhood. Something bad is going wrong. And the idea that we say, well, we're going to raise awareness about this. I mean, I'm not opposed to raising awareness, but I want to see something real happen. And for me, that means money. So I want to see us put in the resources into the places that are treating black women, into the hospitals, into the doctors, into the community centers where they receive treatment. I want to see us put the money into the studies to figure out what's going wrong. This is literally a matter of life and death, and I'm way past let's raise awareness about this. I'm to the point of saying, let's do something about this.
Well, we are so grateful for you to have joined us. Put your hands together, everybody, for Senator Elizabeth Warren.